So I guess a lot of my research has pertained to so-called international teaching assistants, or ITAs for short.
Okay.
ITAs in North American universities are often subject to this kind of deficit perspective about their so-called foreign accents. So students and colleagues might complain that, their accents are unintelligible, right? They're hindrances to their teaching and so on. So basically, IT accents are perceived as these kind of liabilities, professional liabilities. So what I wanted to know, like in one of the studies that I did, was how ITAs deal with this, deficit perspective, right? How do they deal with this label of having, professionally liable, accents? So I wanted to know, how do they engage in what I would call accent work, right? This work to change their accents in order to mitigate, deficit perspectives of their accents. So what I did a small narrative study with 14 ITAs working in the Canadian province of Ontario, and I wanted to know how they engaged in, once again, this term of accent work. I defined accent work as kind of this work that people do on their accents in order to work towards some sort of communicative objective. So what I found was that the ITAs of my study engaged in various types of accent work, which basically, I could define or describe as working on and working around accents. So working on accents kind of dealt with this everyday labor of, minimizing the sound of the foreignness of an accent, for example, hybridizing an accent, so taking phonological elements from different, phonological systems. So those types of working on accent practices were really about, changing your voice to satisfy your interlocutors in different ways. But there was also this practice of working around accents. So this meant like supplementing an accent with like audiovisual aids. So if you were teaching, maybe using like the chalkboard to communicate certain ideas, using gesture, physical gesture, for example, to emphasize points. Sometimes IT also engaged in the labor of just explaining their accents. So preparing students and other audiences that, hey, my accent sounds a particular way. You might perceive it in a particular way. So I'm just warning you, if there's any communicative issues, just let me know and I'll try to, make sure everything, that I adjust my speech accordingly, basically. So those were like different types of, practices that they engaged with. But having said that, each of these practices were not like these neutral apolitical decisions, right? Oftentimes they had to deal with like a native speakerism. So if an ITA classified themselves as a native speaker, non-native speaker, I should say, they felt like, okay, I need to make my voice sound more native to be perceived as more competent, right? Um, but sometimes like ITAs felt kind of proud, they felt proud about their linguistic background, their ethno-racial background, so they wanted to make sure that they sounded a particular way, communicated a particular identity to their interlocutors. So um, sometimes, that political angle was there. They wanted to sort of showcase that they were of a particular race, a particular nationality, and so on. So all of this to say, this type of accent work really showcases how, ITAs, when they're trying to vocally sound professional or vocally sound competent, they're going they're going against the academic status quo in different ways, but they're also conforming in different ways. So it's a very messy kind of process, I would say. But the whole reason of doing this study was really to have us as readers and as kind of more privileged listeners kind of um, interrogate our listening practices. So why do ITAs have to engage in accent work in the first place? Why don't we engage in a different type of labor of listening more ethically so their work is a little bit less strenuous, I would say.